All right, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat if you are just logging in. We'd love to know where you're logging in from and what your role is there so that Grace can scroll and get some ideas of what to share with you specifically. I'm Kelly Ryder. I'm the founder of English Learner Portal, and I have partnered with the company Off to Class. It's OFF. Well, it's right there on the screen. Off to Class for a few years now. And starting with a partnership where I worked with Off to Class, which you'll learn about, to align a lot of their lessons with WIDA standards a few years back. I'd say, well, that was probably 2021 that we did that alignment. And then since then, we've been sharing, taking these opportunities in webinar format to share their services and products with our audience because they are very generous in what they offer for free, and then also great to work with at the district level also. So let me introduce your presenter for tonight. This is Grace, and she's going to give her a more thorough introduction and then get started in sharing Off to Class speaking resources with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kelly. So it's super great to be here with everybody. I don't see any familiar faces so far, but hopefully we'll all get to know each other as we go along tonight. So like Kelly mentioned, I'm Grace Bennett and I work as a teacher trainer at Off to Class. So my background is actually having been a high school and middle school French, ESL, and ELA teacher for at least 10 years. I started to lose track after a while. I was also an ESL program coordinator at a virtual school as well. So I did kind of both sides of the program. So then I brought that experience over to Off to Class because we used Off to Class at the school that I was working at. We adopted that. And I loved it so much and wanted to be able to share with everyone best practices, ways to use it, ways that we can get our L's growing and growing in proficiency and in content knowledge. So I'm really excited to be able to share about specifically WIDA Access speaking prep lessons. Although if you have anything that is adjacent to that, feel free to call it out in the chat and I'm sure I'll be able to give you some recommendations. So I'm going to kind of get started a little bit just with a little bit of an overview of kind of what the approach is and why we have WIDA Access prep lessons. Of course, students, after a while, they've taken it several times and they get used to answering the questions, but they don't necessarily get used to why they haven't moved to the next level or, what exactly is it asking me to do? What are they looking for? And so we design these so that not only can new students get used to how do they ask the questions, how long do I have to answer the questions? What does the test format look like? How can I best prepare and not be freaked out when I see this new testing environment? Also, our homework or our practice assignments are also built to have a recorder. So students can actually have a prompt and then practice pressing the microphone button and speaking into it at length to give a full answer. And then having that awkward experience of listening to their voice back. Like as adults, we know it's always awkward when we do that. And even more so for kids when they're in a room with with their peers and they don't want people to hear them. So the more practice that we can give them consistently with routines, that's low stakes, that's all going to make a difference when it comes to students feeling more prepared and doing better, especially on the speaking section. So I always like to say my biggest takeaways are, or takeaways that I want you to have are consistency is key, making sure that you have the same routines, that you're using those routines as a scaffold. So having that predictable routine of this is how we speak when we're answering a question. We always remember answer the full question, speak for longer than 2 seconds. So you can inject a little humor in there as well. And always just build muscle memory and do low stakes practice with speaking. So these modules, I'm not going to show you, of course, every single lesson, but just the speaking module itself is going to have 6 lessons. And they're going to introduce the test format in the first one and some sample question types in the first lesson. And then the questions in each of the subsequent lessons cover a different ELD standard. So the questions will all be at differing proficiency levels, like they would be on the test, but they're going to vary between social and instructional language, language arts, math, science, and social studies related questions. So you can actually get some practice with those content focused topics. So I'm going to kind of flip over here. So if I look over to the side, I've got a big, big screen set up here. I'm sure you're used to that. So every lesson has your key test taking strategies and some content area practice questions. So you've got 6 of them within the lesson. So you can actually walk through them step by step with a student and say, okay, so let's think through how's the question structured and what are some possible answers to get them thinking through it and thinking, what language do I know to answer the question first, or helping them take apart a reading passage that they're responding to. And then giving you the teacher notes to confidently walk them through their answer and then why the correct answer or a correct answer to the question would get a high score. So you've got rationale for your correct answers. And then the homework or just extra practice gives extra practice questions so you have more samples to work with. So I'm going to flip over here and I'm going to flip to the speaking question right here. So the speaking question in language arts might be about describing characters or setting or context or essay styles. So this one, the language arts class is learning about stories of personal courage. And so they're listening and answering questions about this particular character and how she faces her fears. This one in math is there are some changes to Heather's plan, listen and answer the question. And so they've got visual representation, but they are ultimately doing a speaking task. So I'm going to flip over here to the actual speaking task format so you can see kind of how that's built. So first there's the question. So they're learning about the stories of personal courage. And then you've got to read and listen, and then a teacher. So you can play the role of the teacher and say, you know, why do you think that Bethany's friend tells her to try out for the lead role, even though she's scared? So they're reading this, they're listening, they're thinking through this, and you can use the scaffolds within these lessons to highlight and translate certain words to give them some support because you're just practicing. So you can use that to build your vocabulary and your background knowledge. And then you can here look at a model student answer, listen to that response, and then you can write down notes, have students think, okay, so I can learn from this. Here are some sentence frames or some vocabulary that I can use in my answer. And then you can model how to start the recording and start speaking. So for this one, it's talking about a time when you felt nervous about trying something new. So this is a really great stock one that you can teach students to have in their back pocket. Anytime that they're asked to talk about a personal experience, to use that narrative language to say, hey, have that one in your back pocket that you know you can always talk about if you get a question about a time that you were nervous or a time that you tried something difficult, because those questions get recycled a lot in different forms. So you can have them kind of build out that story, the vocabulary, the sentence frames that they could use to have that comfortable and ready to go in this kind of scenario, so they're not so nervous when they encounter that on the test. And so then you can see the homework that goes along with this one. They've got questions that are in the same structure and then the opportunity to record their response. So then you can then revisit what they recorded and say, hey, here's a couple of ways that we can make this longer or more complex, or we can insert another detail, however you'd like to practice with that. So that's the speaking task format. And I'm actually going to pause there because there are other ways that we practice for speaking, but I just kind of want to see how that resonates and see like what are the things that you feel like your students struggle with the most with speaking. For some, I know that I've worked with, it's confidence or just getting them to speak loudly enough into the microphone. But for you, depending on the age range of students that you're working with or their level, it might be something else. So I'm kind of curious if you have anything that you want to share, you can pop it in the chat. I'll kind of scan through and that'll give me some ideas for other areas that would be helpful to show you. Yeah, K3. Some kids aren't sure how much to say. Yeah. And so they're like, well, if I answer the question with one word, technically it might be right. Um, but of course, on the test, you're wanting to see how much can they say. And yes, we do have, and oh, I think Christine popped in too. Christine may answer in the chat too with a link and all of that, the resources that we're sharing with you guys. Yeah, they don't always look carefully at the directions, the graphics, so they don't actually talk about what's on the actual prompt. Yeah, this is great practice for that. Saying, hey, let's focus on the question. What exactly is it asking us to do? So I'm going to switch my share over here while Christine's pulling that up. She's going to answer about all the resources. So I'm actually going to switch over here. So you should be able to see my lesson library here in a second. Yeah, there we go. And so I'm going to show you more of a newcomer level. So for your young kiddos, and for the ones that are at a lower level, or you just want to have extra speaking practice, we're going to share a couple of these of speaking specific lessons, not just the access prep, that can be good for those lower levels, getting them talking. So I like to use one over here. I think getting around is the one I use the most often. There's a couple others too. I think My Town is also one. So I'm going to click on that. I'm just going to open this up so you guys can see how you can build this in. So you can see in the lesson, you're going to have the slides. And so when you have the free resources, you will as well. So your towns here, so you can have them just talk about what do you see in the picture. And so sometimes you will have tasks that are going to be more descriptive in nature. But you're also having an opportunity here to build vocabulary. So you can say, okay, so here's your one word answers. Now we're going to learn how to build those into more complex directions or a sequence or an order or a description or a narrative. So here's a conversation. You can read and repeat roles in conversations and then practice filling in the blanks. There's always a focus in each of the lessons that I really like, where you've already looked at the context, but then you can bring it to, here's a grammar point that's in context. So we're not just teaching grammar for grammar's sake, but when we're talking about towns, we need to know when to say there is something versus there are some things. So why do we do that? And how does that work in context of talking about towns? And so you have a passage with practice. So you're not just isolating it just to isolate it. And then you've got them just describing and having open conversation, have prompts and things like that. By the end of the lesson, you've released the responsibility and they're more just describing using the words and the scaffolds and things that you've taught. And the homework, like I mentioned before, your homework is going to have your vocabulary focus, and then also both writing and recording. So they can practice, did I actually understand the question? Did I answer the full question? And if you want them to practice here, writing out what they think about something first in the blanks before they record it. Depending on the state that you're in, some states allow students to write things down and then basically read it and record it for speaking, and some don't. So depending on your state, that may or may not be an option. But for practice, for sure, that's definitely a good way to get students to think about, okay, how do I want to say this? Let me practice it and then use the microphone and make sure that I'm speaking loudly enough. And then by the time that they've practiced that enough in those low stakes environment, like I mentioned earlier, with their classmates around, with the teacher around, it brings that effective filter down a lot of times enough that even if there's other students in the room when it's time to test, they've been practicing with this kind of thing for a while and it's no big deal. So you are able to kind of make it hey, this is just something we do in class all the time. So let me look back at the chat and see. Yeah, confidence for sure. Yeah, 9 through 12, not necessarily knowing how to organize their speaking responses. So a lot of these homeworks can be really helpful for practicing that organization aspect, like starting with a topic sentence, a couple of details, supporting ideas, those types of things. So what I showed you here was more of a newcomer focused one for basic vocabulary. If I go down to, let me going to try not to give you whiplash with the colors here, but I'm going to go down to speaking activities. Picnic in the countryside can be a really nice one for this because it's low stakes. It's not super stressful or anything like that. They're not really focused on anything um, strenuous. So this one is a lot of, you've got pictures and they can build from the images. So that can be a really good one as well. If you want to build more cause and effect or argumentative, persuasive language, I'll show one here that can be good for that. It's at a higher level. Let me bring this one down. Yeah. I'm going to scroll through them. Okay. This one's really good because all kids like to talk about screens and screen time and their social media. But this one is more of, can we talk about the impacts of something and then have develop a stance and then why I think that way. So you've got the vocabulary building first, of course, and then how does this affect you? How much screen time do you have? What's appropriate? And then talking about the more disciplinary focused words, consequence, dependence, neglect, building that in. You got some reading comprehension. And then you have some people who are expressing their issues, so personal experiences. So you're getting that practice responding to what someone else thinks or says. So how do you experience similar issues to those described by the speakers? And then by the end, you've got opposing views and you've got a scenario and you're like, okay, so if you had kids, what restrictions would you have? Can you explain your choices? Why or why not? And so there's lots of different directions that you could go with this, but sometimes if you get kind of a juicy, interesting, relatable topic like this, kids are like, oh, I know some of these words. I have opinions about this I'd like to express. I do need help organizing them. And so you've got a homework assignment like this. So like so many people are addicted to using their devices. I think the world would be a better place if they'd never been invented. And then an open record. So you could work with them throughout the lesson with some scaffolds that are appropriate. You can use the dictionary and things like that are in the lesson to build vocabulary. And then by the end, you can say, here's some sentence frames. And here's how we structure a response. This is what I think because reason, example. And so they can write out what they think here. They can practice recording it and have a few different things that they can respond to here. And also one thing that can be really super helpful, this is a new feature and I'm really excited about it. It's really exciting what we can do now harnessing the power of AI to help us save time so we can use human interaction for the things that human interaction is intended for and is really good at, like relating with students. So when students write in these homework assignments, our AI auto grader will give it a score and will come up with feedback that includes an actionable next step for the student and some encouragement. You can always edit that, of course. You can use it as a starting point. You can erase it completely, but it does help to cut down that time and close the feedback loop for students. And you can also use that to help give you ideas of ways that you can help them expand upon their speaking responses as well. So there is that as well. So those are a couple of different levels and different ways that you can approach the speaking tasks. Another way that I like to use those speaking activities is in partner speak sessions where they're just talking to each other. They don't have to feel like they're talking to the whole class or they're talking to just the teacher. They can just practice responding to those prompts one-on-one with each other. And then maybe if they're comfortable, then share out one thing that their classmates said that they really liked. Or they can share out something that they wanted to share once they've kind of practiced it one with the other. And they can give each other that feedback. I saw where Sharon said sometimes they need that vocal training, how to project their voice. and enunciate and speak slowly so that the microphone can pick up all the sounds. So that can be a really good way to build in those partner speak sessions and the peer feedback, because sometimes they hear it differently if it comes from a peer. And their peer says, "Oh, I can't hear you, speak up." Instead of coming from you, like you need to speak up. And they're like, "Yeah, I'm speaking quietly because I don't want you to hear me." But sometimes they can build that confidence with their peers in class. So you've got peer modeling that can reduce anxiety quite a bit. And then a lot of these, both the speaking for newcomers and the speaking activities, plus the WIDA Access prep lessons that I showed, all those are really good for organizing thoughts on the fly, using that academic vocabulary in context, and then also elaborating on that. There's one other section that I wanted to show you guys, and that is, these are my absolute favorite, and this is where I really nerd out because of my background teaching language arts and literacy, and there was a lot of social studies that was in my background, having studied French and all of that stuff and studying abroad. So all of that kind of converges here in this core curriculum area and these language arts lessons. So if you wanted to help students structure their speaking, sometimes it helps to look at examples of writing. And so if you wanted them to practice preparing and delivering a speech, which what they're doing here is a little bit similar, you could go to this preparing and delivering a speech lesson. And that's going to help them understand the things that people do when they're good speakers. Now, eye contact is not necessarily going to come into play when they're speaking into a microphone, but the clear articulation and the way that they carry themselves and speak, that can be really good practice in building that confidence. So you could do a lesson like this. It also has examples in here, like should people have pets? And they're going to look at an example of a persuasive speech and how the person structures their argument. And so that could give them some ideas and give you a springboard to also build in some sentence structures and things like that. So you can look at this and then bring, it's broken apart into pieces already. So you can see here, you're reading the first part, you're looking at the vocabulary, seeing if they can identify just from the first paragraph, what's the main idea? Has she given us a clue as to her opinion on the topic? And how do we know that? Okay, so we're starting to build in so here's how I can tell people what my opinion is and then support that. So you could do a lesson like this. It's going to go into rhetorical questions, how to use emotive language, things like that. So if you want to go that direction, you can. And then also, since the WIDA Access prep lessons I started with, they all focus on a different core content area like science or math. One that I really like to delve in a little deeper in the math area is understanding word problems. Because what student doesn't need help understanding word problems? I know I did. So understanding word problems just helps you build the language of math. So you're not actually teaching word problems. I mean, there's a few in here that you could cover, but you're looking at, okay, how do I understand if I'm reading a passage or if I'm answering a question and I'm supposed to use math language to do it? I'm having to describe to someone how to solve this problem, or things like that. So this can help you build a lot of that background math language. Like, what are all the different ways that we can talk about addition? All the different words we can use when we're talking about subtraction, because it's not always minus. Sometimes it's less than. It could be decrease. So helping them to identify those when they see them in other questions can be super helpful and help them to feel a lot more confident. And so they don't just shut down when they see, oh, it's a math question, I don't know math stuff, or oh, this is a science question, I don't know how to talk about graphs. So this one can be really, really helpful for helping them to fill in that language. It's got all different kinds of word problem goodies in there. For science, if you wanted to dig a little deeper into sequential language, this photosynthesis lesson is really, really good. It's obviously going to talk about a process and the language of processes. And another one that's also really good, let me grab this, is summarizing findings. because having that ability to summarize things into a main idea, especially when you're talking about scientific things, can be really helpful. So you're talking about how to organize your findings. And then there's another one that I always go to, and I think it's explaining cause and effect, because sometimes that can be a little bit tricky for students when you're talking about science. And so you've got a lot of images, a lot of opportunity for them to explain what they're thinking and what they're seeing. But then linguistically, what are the sentence structures that we need to do to say, this happened, so this happened, or this happened because this other thing happened, and what verb tenses do we use for those things? So I just wanted to touch on a few of those because they can just be a really good way to build the background vocabulary, the comfort level with core content language, and then you can also carry those over into WIDA Access prep lessons and look at just actual practice. So I'm going to pause and see any questions that have come up. I know Christine popped in to the chat where you can take a look at the lesson library. So I'm sure you've probably been kind of poking around while I've been talking. And like Christine said, we're partnering with Kelly to give away premium access for the rest of the school year. So you don't have to look at downloads or anything like that. You can just teach the lessons that I just showed you in any order or fashion that works for your students. Any questions, any comments, any other things that your students would find beneficial?
Hi, my name is Vanessa. Thank you again for the offer. I did put my question in the chat, but I thought for the good of the group, I clicked on the link that was given us, and it says free 1 year access, but then it asks what lessons do you want, and I wanted to be clear. I guess generally what I should click, but based on what you were showing, what should we click to get those materials?
Yeah, actually, I feel like I would just pick the best descriptor because you'll get access to everything. That just helps us to know if there's one thing more than something else that you're most interested in or that you might use the most. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
okay. It does. Could you just tell me what mixed level and LT, sorry, I want to say correctly. Mixed
LTEL?
level. Yes. What does that mean?
Yeah, for sure. So mixed levels, a lot of times I work with teachers who have multiple levels of students in one classroom. So they might have some newcomers, but they might have some level threes that are kind of mixed in because their classroom just they don't have the capacity at their school to split them out. And so it's just resources and ways that we train teachers to work with multiple levels in one room, different strategies that you can use for that. And then the other one, LTELs, is long-term English learners. Lots of different names for them, but the ones who are just kind of hanging around and they need a push to finally be able to exit from services.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me look back in the chat. Yeah, okay, so there's your question, Vanessa. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, can definitely put in the chat some of my favorite exercises. So in the core curriculum math, understanding word problems, that's one of my all-time favorites. So it's 6-1 and 6-2. Unit 6 lesson 1 and unit 6 lesson 2 are focused on word problems. Language arts also language arts, it's also unit 6, 6-1 and 6-2. Those are going to be your persuasive, which I find are also really, really helpful. Actually, unit 6 is on neutral tone, which is also really helpful. Unit 5 is on establishing a stance and persuasive techniques. Obviously, the WIDA access prep. So you can find those in here. They're going to be, if you select WIDA from the top framework button, it'll be up at the top, towards the top. So you've got listening, reading, speaking, and writing. So speaking is the third one. So WIDA access speaking. All 6 of those are going to be really key resources. I would also use topics from speaking for newcomers and from speaking activities. Those are the two categories. If you are just looking for something a little more topic focused and you just want to get them talking and you want to have that homework to assign to them, and I say homework, that's just kind of what we call it. You can assign it to them as they can do it in a group, they could do it in a small group, they could do it at home if they wanted to. All of this is internet based, so they have a browser, they have access. And so you could do that. You could also do it just as a regular assignment, an in-class assignment or an exit ticket. And so those are really helpful for that because they can use the recording button and they can practice for sure. And I would say also core curriculum social studies, there's actually a fair bit of comprehension in there on all different kinds of questions. And so you can pretty much pick from there any topic that your students would be interested in to get them talking about it for speaking practice specifically. So hopefully that gives you a few options there in the chat that you can explore and kind of come back to depending on what your students are interested in. Yes, Christine can clarify. I believe it goes through June. That would be the end of most people's school year.
Yes, that's correct. Also, another thing we could do for you guys is we could share the list of different modules and units that Grace just mentioned with Kelly. And with that webinar, she can list those resources out for you so that it's all there, it's clear, and you can search them up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Have it all in one spot with links too. So you can actually just like click the link and go directly to the lesson. Although I have to say, it does bring a smile to my face to scroll through the lesson library just because the colors make me happy. But lesson links are good too.
Yeah,
yes,
Grace,
George.
would you want to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just looking in the chat. You go ahead and I'm going to read this question.
Did you want to go to where exactly the WIDA lessons are? That way they can remember the color, and then once they click in, they can immediately go.
Yeah, there we go.
It's right there in the pink.
Yeah. On mine they're pink. And I don't think the colors change if you select a different framework from the top, but they are going to be all the way across in the 4 small boxes since that's the way they fit across. Yeah. So your question, S. George, do students usually have more ease with technology on apps or phone or on laptops? I would say, I mean, with Off to Class, it kind of depends on what they're most comfortable with just in general. I would say a tablet or a laptop are generally going to be probably easier because that will allow them to type on the homework a little bit better than having a small keyboard. Although that could just be my age talking and I'm more comfortable with a keyboard. They might not be, but it might be easier for them to press on the microphone and have it be more like the testing experience and what they're doing at school. Newcomers, I find they just have trouble with a lot of technology just in general. And so as much as you can lift that burden from them, the better. So with newcomers, I usually recommend if you're going to do the lesson, just project it on your front screen, like in your classroom, project it on your board and orally have them participate. And don't worry with logging them into anything. That's what I really, really love about Off to Class is that it's so flexible. Like you can have students work on their computer on the assignment after you've done a lesson, but you can also just use it as teacher guided instruction. Students are orally participating and talking and building language, or both. So it's really, really flexible. You can definitely work with students who are not tech savvy, and you can work with students who are like all about typing their answers, either way. Yeah, any other questions or any specific scenarios where you're like, I wonder what lessons would be really great for this particular group of students or topics or anything like that? Yeah, I totally get that. And you do hear that from from different districts around the country, you can print the homework. I would not recommend trying to print the the lesson content. It would be very ink heavy, a lot of images, but you can right click and or control P and you can print the homework assignments. So you can have them fill in the answers and they can write and you have all the prompts there. So that is one way that you could do that. You could just do one lesson projected on your front screen. You can go through the exercises and then you can have students pen and paper write answers or take notes as you go along, or build a vocabulary notebook or an interactive notebook, things like that. I have a lot of teachers that do that just because they do want students to have that pencil paper experience. And then you can print the homework so you're not having to, do all the questions that way. But yeah, you could definitely do a hybrid like that. Yeah, for sure. Any other questions or any other lesson groupings or things that you've run into, topics you're curious about?
Yeah, I would also like to say that if you guys have any future questions regarding anything in the lesson library, sequences that you want to access, like particular like lesson types you're looking for, you can always get in touch with us in via the chat box, and then our support will get back to you with what they recommend for you and your lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I've really loved working here is how responsive we are. I love getting questions from teachers who are like, it would be really cool if you had a lesson on skydiving, but it needs to be about persuading someone not to go skydiving. And, the next month or two, we have a lesson on why people shouldn't go skydiving. So very responsive. I love how we're able to quickly give teachers and students what they're looking for. For developing a claim, I would go to the core curriculum language arts section right here. A few different lessons that you could use for that would be within literary techniques, probably establishing a stance, uh, persuasive techniques. And you could also probably find that it's going to be woven into a lot of different areas. I'm thinking comparative essays can include that a little bit. So I would go through there and see what fits the way that you like to teach developing a claim. And then I can also give Christina a list of other lessons that are within the step-by-step curriculum at varying levels that all work on developing a claim. Because I'm thinking of one that's in Unit 41. It's more at a intermediate level, but this one could be a good fit for that. It's talking about the environment, and students are organizing and writing a discussion essay about an environmental issue. So they're using sequence words, example words, and containing language, starting with a strong statement, containing language to introduce new ideas and support them, and then bring it together with a conclusion. So that would be my top recommendation, Unit 41, Lesson 4. And you could scaffold that definitely depending on the level of your students. Cool. Christine might be
Rosemary,
able to answer that.
yep, let me answer that. You do have to use your district email to gain access to the full lesson library. That way, we can make sure that everything's aligned to like what you need. For instance, like for our WIDA states, we'll make sure to share resources with you that are like specifically aligned to what you're looking for. So Rosemary, do make sure to sign up with your district email to gain that full access.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Okay.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
got it. Rosemary, what I would do is, how about this? I will send you a chat right now, and then you can share your email with me, or if you're comfortable, you can share it here. I'll get in touch with my support team so that we can get that access reopened for you immediately.
Awesome. Yeah, Kelly, I really like that too, the functional language. Speaking of which, we actually just launched a new set of lessons today, or yesterday. I would remember being really excited when these launched, and these can also be really helpful just in general for test prep, maybe not as much, but it's going to be stuff that your students, especially your high schoolers, are are using already, especially if they're working. So it's going to be things like how to go to a doctor's appointment or see the school nurse or go to the pharmacy, emergency language, like how do you understand severe weather warnings and school fire drills, and how do I talk to people at the DMV when I'm getting a driver's license, or how do I understand this utility bill, school safety, mental health, online safety, how do I apply to college, interviews, stuff like that, things that are pretty specific situations, but are so common to everyone. So those just launched over the past couple of days. So definitely give those a look through as well and see if that fits anything that you're working on. I should mention, I realized I didn't mention it before, but since we're kind of widening the scope a little bit, we have the Everyday English for Newcomers. So with all those things that I just mentioned, right below that, I know a couple of you mentioned that you had either looked through or you were really interested in the foundational literacy. And the foundational literacy is science of reading based, and it's a progressive module of phonics instruction, basically. So if you have SLIFE students, your students with limited or interrupted formal education, or you've got younger students, or you've got newcomers that are secondary, it's going to give you that basis to build phonics and literacy instruction that they missed, or that they had in bits and pieces. And so it's not babyish, it's more secondary focused, so that if you have a ninth, 10th, or 11th or 12th grader, but they need the basics of phonics, they don't feel talked down to or embarrassed because they're using a kindergarten textbook. So it's very much geared towards secondary learners who need some of those foundational phonics pieces to be able to read confidently. And you can pair that with any of the other functional language or interactive language lessons that are in the library, and maybe do a couple of those a week. And you don't have to start at the very beginning, but you can definitely fill in any of the phonics gaps that they may have, and that can go a long way in making them more confident readers. Let's see if there were any other questions or comments. Make sure I didn't miss any. Yeah, that's a good question. So, it's actually kind of half and half. I feel like there are a lot of districts that teach in person. I personally taught virtually with Off to Class. There are a lot of people who use it in a district while they're in person with a group of students, but maybe the district has 19 different schools that are spread across this geographic area. And so they don't have enough teachers for each school. So maybe they gather the English learners in a few of the other schools at the same time, and they have them online, and they're following along with the lesson, and they're on Zoom. So it can be a hybrid, it can be in person, it can be fully virtual. I see pretty much all of it. A new student from China who has some spoken but really needs help with English literacy. Good. Yeah, I'm excited for you to be able to use that with her, especially for a language that is not as adjacent to the sounds in English. It's really helpful to have the phonemic awareness training that's here within the foundational literacy. And one other thing I really love about our foundational literacy lessons is that you don't have to feel like you need to go back to school to be able to teach them. If you're not a reading specialist, if you're not an elementary educator, chances are your reading instruction in college was probably not super robust, because by the time you're teaching middle school or high school, students have already learned to read, hopefully. So you don't have a lot of that in your toolbox, but all of the teacher notes that go along with every slide tell you exactly what to say, exactly what everything means. And so you're able to do that confidently, even if you haven't taught reading to second graders before, for example. Yeah, Christine, that is another one of my favorite things is they show the shape that your mouth is supposed to be in to make the sound, which is super key for kids to be able to do that and make the sounds. Yeah, great, Sharon. Yeah, I always had students who were, in high school, and this was before these were developed. I really needed something that could have filled those gaps in a way that didn't make them feel like, oh, I'm going to have to go back to elementary school if I'm ever going to learn how to read. So this really fills that need. Yeah, I'm really excited that you're looking around. And like Christine mentioned, as you're looking around, you can always send us questions. We're more than happy to help you get off the ground and feel like this is a tool that you're getting all that you can out of. So we're happy to share everything that we know. Let's see, I'll let you answer Sharon's question, Christine, since you know the ins and outs of the subscriptions.
Yes, Sharon, absolutely. I will share the coupon as well as the link again with Kelly so that she can share that alongside the list of lessons you guys have asked for during this webinar, as well as the video recording of this webinar. So you can feel free to forward that, share that with your fellow teachers as well.
And just out of curiosity, I know we're approaching end of time, but I'm just out of curiosity, if you had a unit on any topic and you just haven't been able to find this unit, this magical unicorn unit that you want to teach for your English learners, what would the topic be? What's the one thing that you just haven't found yet? Oh, I'm so curious. I haven't asked that before. Yeah. Yeah, there's the link. Perfect. Yeah, examples of what level 1, level 2, level 3 discourse sounds like so students can up their game. Yeah, we really like to use that kind of modeling in the way the lessons are structured. I'll have to check and see if it's like actually broken down and says this is level 1. However, what you will find is if you're in a level 1, like if you're in an entering level lesson, everything is going to be structured to push them up to the next level. So you can start to fill in those gaps. Um, yeah. You're studying to take the naturalization test and interview. There is a whole core curriculum section called civics and citizenship, and those lessons are actually structured specifically from the topics that are found on the citizenship test. Because there are a lot of districts I've worked with, and one that I taught at that actually had a citizenship test, just not like the real one, but a test that you had to take to graduate from high school. And so sometimes that can be really helpful to have instruction in that for that reason as well. One thing Rosemary says she struggles with is how to teach analysis to kids who are accustomed to memorizing the right answer, like inquiry questions. Yeah, yeah, that's a really great one. Yeah, for sure. I think that the language arts lessons and the social studies lessons are good places to go for that. Also, the speaking activities, I will say, because then you can use those topics that are, the lessons are designed with language that's accessible and gives you the opportunity to keep pushing with questioning and say, okay, well, no, there's not actually a right answer. I just want to know what you think. And let's use the vocabulary to talk about what you think about the pictures or this particular passage or things like that. So yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that. That gives me something to chew on as well. Kelly, you had a question in the email about, is this available to international teachers who don't have a district email? So I'll pass that to Christine.
Yes. So we're actually actively working on developing a model that would work the best for our international teachers. We currently don't have that available just yet, but we're working on that with our team, and we will keep we will keep Kelly and everyone updated regarding that process.
And Sharon also asked, can you post the page that allows for the sign up for premium access? I can't test it because when I click it, it logs me in.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I think I must have had a glitch, but yes, so that page is the sign up page for the K-12 um, district teachers. Kelly, were you able to you must have been you're logged into the off to class account, so that's why probably when you click on it you get directly access into the lesson library. But if you don't have an account just yet, if you do click that link, it's going to take you to the premium access sign up page.
Thanks, Christine. For MZ, I do work with some districts in New York. And so I feel like that sounds familiar to me. We're also, we have SOC 2 compliance status, and we have a ton of security protocols and privacy protocols. So I'm pretty sure that we have that one covered, but we can definitely chat with you offline and make sure that we've got all the bases covered for you. Yeah, for sure. Right. I think we only have about a minute left, so I want to hand it over to Kelly and see if there's any parting thoughts that you had for us.
I just want to say thank you. Off to Class has always been generous with our teachers of sharing resources, but I think this is multiples more materials to have access to than I've seen in the past. So I just want to say thank you for being so generous. We really appreciate that. And just reassure everyone that they have many, many, many more new lessons since last I was in there doing alignment work. But I do know the quality of the lessons and the materials and the constant searching for feedback and refinement. So I really trust that you'll love the resources and want to use them. One thing that didn't come up that I've seen before is a district that I used to work with used Off to Class for parent education. So they wanted to do something with some of their Title III grant money, and they had Open Computer Lab and they had Off to Class accounts and things like that that they could share. So that's another idea that came out. So if you come up with any questions once you start digging through, there is a place there through Off to Class that you can ask those questions directly to Off to Class folks. But if you want to send questions to me, I know some of the answers, and the ones I don't know, I'll refer back to Christine and to Grace to follow up. For housekeeping, tomorrow morning I will put the video and follow-up email together with the link to the video to rewatch, link to the registration so that it's easy for you to share with anyone, maybe a teammate or someone who couldn't be here this evening, maybe a supervisor if you need to get some approval or start that process. So we'll make that easy for you and get that all together for you tomorrow. If you do not see an email from me by lunchtime, then please reach out. Sometimes our emails get caught in spam filters. If you were getting our webinar emails, you should get that follow-up email, but every so often things happen. So if you don't see it by lunchtime, just reach out and let me know, and we'll find another way to get that information to you. I will also be uploading the video into our YouTube channel. So if you search English Learner Portal on YouTube, you will find this by lunchtime tomorrow is another way to go about finding it, and lots and lots and lots of other past English Learner Portal videos that you can explore. Christine, Grace, anything you can think of to add before we say goodnight?
I just want to say thank you so much, Kelly and Grace for presenting the lovely materials, and Kelly for hosting us. It's been such a great 1 hour session. I learn something new every time I actually like take a PD session from Grace as well. So I hope everyone had a good time today as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it. The only thing that I would add is I put it in the chat, but if you have questions as you're in the library, there's a little chat icon down at the bottom corner. So you can definitely get a hold of either of us that way.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who has the dedication that you do to join us in the evening after work when you are already working or enjoying snow days. I hope it warms up where you are, and maybe gives you a little extra time to explore that you might not have had. So, well, let's, more snow, especially for the South. Right? You all are going to get some more this weekend.
That's where I am. I'm not looking forward to it. It still hasn't melted from last week. School hasn't been in session the whole week.
Same in like Maryland, Virginia, lots of people missing school. All right, gives us some extra time to explore Off to Class. All right, thank you. And again, you'll hear from me tomorrow, and have a great evening and a great weekend. Hopefully you can find somewhere warm. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.